Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. He had been exploring space for 15 years but had never seen anything like this. The empty black void ahead of them should have been full of radio signals and light from alien worlds. Instead, there was nothing but silence. Lisa Hayes sat at her communications station and shook her head. She had been trying to contact 17 different star systems for the past 3 hours. All of them had been sending signals just 6 months ago. Now her speakers produced only static and her screens showed flat lines where busy alien chatter should have been. "Captain, I am getting nothing from the Zephyrian Empire," Lisa said. Her voice was quiet and worried. "They were broadcasting poetry readings yesterday according to our long-range sensors. Now there is complete silence." Jake walked over to her station and looked at the displays. The Zephyrians were known throughout the galaxy for never stopping their communications. They sent poems and songs and stories across space every minute of every day. For them to go quiet meant something terrible had happened. Darben Parker looked up from his science station. He was studying the last recorded transmissions from all 17 civilizations. His face was pale and his hands shook slightly as he worked. "Captain, you need to see this," he said. Each civilization stopped broadcasting in the middle of whatever they were doing. The Zephyrians cut off during a love poem. The Crystalline Confederacy stopped while solving a math problem. The Verdani were singing about their harvest season and just stopped. Commander Amy Sullivan walked onto the bridge carrying a datapad. She was in charge of weapons and security and never looked worried. Today she looked very worried. "Captain, our long-range scanners are detecting debris fields where space stations used to be," she said. "But there are no signs of weapons fire. No hull damage from battles. The stations just seem to have stopped working." Jake felt a cold fear growing in his stomach. 17 advanced alien civilizations did not just disappear without leaving some trace of what happened to them. He looked around at his crew of 200 people. They were all counting on him to make the right decision. "Set course for the edge of the silent zone," Jake ordered. "We need to find out what happened to our alien friends." Navigator Tony Martinez plotted their course carefully. The silent zone stretched across 400 light-years of space. It was a perfect circle with clear boundaries. Outside the zone, everything was normal with busy alien traffic and communications. Inside the zone, there was nothing but empty space and floating debris. The Defiance moved closer to the zone boundary. The crew became more nervous. Chief Engineer Rick Davis reported that their instruments were starting to act strangely. Scanners would work perfectly one moment and then show impossible readings the next. The ship's computer kept running diagnostic tests on itself as if something was interfering with its systems. Security. Chief Karen White organized teams to check every part of the ship. She wanted to make sure they were ready for anything they might find in the silent zone. Her teams reported that all weapons were ready and all defensive systems were working properly. But everyone could feel that something was very wrong. Dr. Parker continued studying the final transmissions from the lost civilizations. He played them over and over looking for clues. The Zephyrian poet had been describing the beauty of a sunset. On his homeworld, his voice was happy and peaceful. Then he stopped speaking in the middle of a word about golden light. There was no sound of danger or fear. He just stopped. The Crystalline Confederacy had been broadcasting mathematical equations, as they always did. Their crystal minds thought in numbers and shared complex formulas with anyone who would listen. The last equation they sent was incomplete. It stopped at the equal sign with no answer given. For a species that lived for solving problems, this was impossible. Lisa kept trying to raise any signal from inside the silent zone. She sent messages in every language and on every frequency. She tried emergency channels and diplomatic channels and even entertainment broadcasts. Nothing came back except empty static. It was as if the zone was swallowing every signal they sent. Jake made his decision. Against all regulations in common sense, he ordered the ship to cross into the silent zone. His crew needed to know what had happened to 17 civilizations. Earth needed to know if this silence was spreading toward human space. The Defiance had the best crew and the most advanced technology humanity had ever built. If anyone could solve this mystery, it was them. As their ship crossed the invisible boundary into the silent zone, every crew member felt a strange sensation. It was like walking into a room where someone had just died. The very space around them felt empty and cold. Their instruments confirmed they were now inside the zone where 17 civilizations had vanished without a trace. Jake looked at his crew and saw his own determination reflected in their faces. They would find answers, even if it meant risking their lives. The silence that had swallowed the stars would not claim humanity without a fight. The Defiance had been traveling through the silent zone for 2 days when Lisa Hayes detected something impossible on her sensors. "Captain, there are structures out there," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "They are huge, but they do not show up properly on our scanners." Jake Morrison moved to the main viewing screen and stared into space. At first he saw nothing but stars and empty darkness. Then his eyes began to pick out shapes that seemed to bend light around them. Massive black pyramids drifted between the stars like sleeping giants. Each one was the size of Earth's moon, but they cast no shadows and reflected no light. Dr. Ben Parker ran every scan he could think of on the strange structures. His instruments kept giving him the same impossible reading. "Captain, according to our sensors, these pyramids do not exist," he said. "They register as empty space even though we can see them with our eyes. It is like they are holes cut out of reality itself." Chief Engineer Rick Davis tried to get closer readings with the ship's most sensitive equipment. Every time he pointed a scanner at one of the pyramids, his instruments would malfunction. Screens would go blank or show random symbols. Some devices would shut down completely and refuse to restart until they were no longer aimed at the structures. Security. Chief Karen White organized reconnaissance teams to study the pyramids from different angles. Her teams reported the same thing every time. The structures were clearly there but could not be measured or analyzed. They existed but did not exist at the same time. Navigator Tony Martinez plotted the positions of all the pyramids he could detect. There were hundreds of them scattered throughout the silent zone. When he connected their positions on his star charts, he discovered they formed a perfect geometric pattern. The pattern was slowly moving toward the center of the galaxy. Earth lay directly in their path. Amy Sullivan studied the tactical implications of the pyramid formation. "Captain, these structures are not random," she said. "They are positioned like a net closing around something. If this pattern continues to contract, it will reach human space in less than 50 years. Jake ordered the ship to investigate one of the smaller pyramids. As they approached the black structure, the crew began to feel strange. Some reported headaches and dizziness. Others said they could hear whispers in languages they did not recognize. Dr. Parker noted that everyone's brain activity was changing in ways he had never seen before. The pyramid grew larger on their screens as they got closer. Its surface was perfectly smooth and completely black. No detail could be seen, no matter how much they magnified their view. It was like looking at a piece of space that had been cut out and replaced with nothingness. When the Defiance was only a few thousand kilometers from the pyramid, something incredible happened. The structure began to change. Patterns of dim light appeared on its surface, forming symbols that hurt to look at directly. The symbols seemed to move and shift when no one was watching them directly. Lisa detected energy readings coming from inside the pyramid. The energy was unlike anything in human databases. It did not behave like electricity or radiation or any known force. Instead, it seemed to absorb other forms of energy around it. The pyramid was feeding on the cosmic background radiation that filled all of space. Dr. Parker made a disturbing discovery while studying the energy patterns. "Captain, I think these pyramids are alive," he said. "The energy signatures match what we would expect from a massive brain. But this brain is the size of a moon and appears to be incredibly old." As if responding to their presence, the pyramid began to move toward their ship. It accelerated smoothly without any visible propulsion system. The crew watched in fascination and terror as the massive structure approached them. There was nowhere to run and nothing they could do to stop it. Jake ordered all weapons to be prepared, but Amy Sullivan shook her head. "Captain, our weapons would be like throwing rocks at a mountain," she said. "This thing is too big and too powerful for us to fight." The pyramid stopped just a few hundred meters from their ship. Up close, they could see that its surface was covered in billions of tiny symbols that moved constantly. The symbols seemed to be some kind of writing, but they hurt to look at. For more than a few seconds, suddenly every screen on the bridge displayed the same message in perfect English. "We are the Harbingers," the message read. "We bring silence to the chaos. We harvest the noise that disturbs the peace of space. Your species will join the others in eternal quiet." Dr. Parker realized what had happened to the 17 civilizations. "Captain, they were not destroyed," he said. "They were absorbed. These harbingers feed on consciousness itself. They take the minds of entire civilizations and add them to their collective." The pyramid began to emit a low humming sound that seemed to come from inside the ship rather than from outside. Crew members started to feel drowsy and peaceful. Some began to smile as if they were hearing beautiful music that no one else could. Jake fought against the peaceful feeling spreading through his mind. He knew it was a trap designed to make them surrender without fighting. "All hands, resist the calming effect," he shouted over the ship's communication system. "Do not listen to the peaceful sounds. Fight to stay alert." Lisa tried to send a warning message to Earth, but discovered their communications were being blocked. Every signal they tried to broadcast was absorbed by the pyramid before it could leave the area. They were cut off from the rest of humanity with no way to warn anyone about the approaching danger. The message on their screens changed to show images of the absorbed civilizations. The crew could see billions of alien beings standing motionless, with peaceful expressions on their faces. They were still alive, but no longer individuals. They had become part of something larger and more terrible than death itself. Jake realized they had discovered something that could end all life in the galaxy. The Harbingers were moving toward Earth and every other inhabited world. Unless someone could stop them, every thinking being in the galaxy would share the fate of the 17 silent civilizations. The peaceful humming from the Harbinger Pyramid grew stronger, and Jake Morrison felt his thoughts becoming fuzzy and distant. Around the bridge, his crew members were starting to sway gently as if listening to a lullaby. He knew they had only minutes before the Harbinger absorbed their minds like it had done to 17 civilizations. Dr. Sophie Kim was the ship's psychologist, and she noticed something strange happening to the crew. While most of them were falling under the Harbinger's influence, a few were resisting better than others. "Captain, the crew members who are staying alert are all doing the same thing," she said. "They are talking to themselves, or humming songs, or making some kind of noise." Jake realized she was right. Lisa Hayes was muttering technical specifications under her breath. Rick Davis was quietly singing an old engineering work song. Amy Sullivan was counting tactical procedures out loud. The crew members who were making noise were fighting off the Harbinger's influence better than those who stayed quiet. "Everyone start talking," Jake shouted. "Sing songs, tell jokes, make any kind of noise you can think of. Do not let silence take hold in your minds." The bridge suddenly filled with voices as the crew began talking and singing and making noise. The peaceful humming from the pyramid seemed to weaken slightly, for the first time since encountering the Harbinger. Jake felt hope growing in his chest, but their resistance did not last long. The pyramid began to emit a stronger signal that overwhelmed their voices. One by one, the crew members fell silent as the Harbinger's influence took control of their minds. Jake watched in horror as his friends and colleagues became peaceful and empty-eyed. A brilliant white light surrounded the ship, and Jake felt himself being pulled into the pyramid. The last thing he saw was the bridge of his ship fading away. As reality itself seemed to dissolve around him, Jake woke up in a place that could not exist. He was standing in a vast space filled with soft white light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Around him, he could see millions of beings from dozens of different species. They all stood quietly with peaceful expressions on their faces. "Welcome to the collective," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a tall alien with blue skin and 4 arms. The being wore the uniform of a Zephyrian naval officer. "I am Admiral Zoreth. I commanded the 3rd Fleet of the Zephyrian Empire until 6 months ago." Jake looked around at the endless crowd of absorbed beings. "Are we dead?" he asked. "No," Zoreth replied. "We are preserved. Our bodies are gone, but our minds continue to exist as part of the Harbinger Collective. We have perfect peace here. No conflict, no pain, no confusion. Only eternal silence and calm." "But we are prisoners," Jake said. Zoreth nodded sadly. "Yes, we are prisoners. The Harbingers have been doing this for thousands of years. They move through the galaxy harvesting civilizations when they become too noisy. They believe consciousness is a disease that disturbs the natural silence of space." Jake began to understand the scope of the threat facing humanity. "How many civilizations have they absorbed?" he asked. "Hundreds," Zoreth answered. "Maybe thousands. Every 50,000 years they wake from their sleep and harvest whatever species have evolved to the point of making noise across star systems. Then they return to the dark spaces between galaxies to wait for the next harvest." Jake searched the crowd until he found his crew members. They were all there standing peacefully among the absorbed aliens. He tried to talk to Lisa Hayes, but she only smiled at him with empty eyes. The Harbinger influence had taken away everything that made her human. Dr. Sophie Kim appeared beside Jake looking confused and angry. "Captain, I can still think clearly," she said. "Something about human psychology is different from the other species here. We are not being absorbed as completely as they were." Sophie began studying the other absorbed beings and discovered something important. Most alien species communicated through telepathy or energy patterns or bioelectric fields. They were naturally quiet and orderly in their thinking. Humans were different because they had evolved verbal language and emotional expression that created actual sound waves. "Captain, we make noise in a way these harbingers have never encountered before," Sophie explained. "Other species think quietly inside their minds. Humans think out loud. We argue with ourselves, we sing when we are happy, we shout when we are angry. Our consciousness is naturally noisy." Jake began to understand why some of his crew had resisted the Harbinger influence longer than others. Human minds were not designed for silence the way alien minds were. Even when absorbed into the collective humans maintained some individual thought patterns. Sophie gathered the human crew members who were still thinking clearly. There were about 30 of them out of the original 200. "We need to make noise," she told them. "Our voices are the one thing the Harbingers cannot completely control." Lieutenant Sam Brooks had been a military communications specialist before joining the Exploration Service. "If we can coordinate our voices, we might be able to disrupt the collective," he said. "Human battle cries have been used to break enemy morale for thousands of years. Maybe they can break Harbinger control too." Jake felt excitement building as he realized they might have found a weapon against the ancient entities. "Everyone who can still think clearly gather around me," he ordered. "We are going to try something that has never been done before." The 30 humans formed a circle in the vast white space of the collective. Jake could feel the Harbinger influence trying to quiet their minds, but human voices were naturally resistant to forced silence. He took a deep breath and let out the loudest battle cry he could manage. The sound echoed through the collective space like thunder. Around them, the peaceful alien beings looked confused as if waking from a dream. The white light flickered and dimmed. For just a moment, Jake could see cracks appearing in the walls of their prison. "Again," he shouted. "Everyone together this time." 30 human voices joined together in a primal scream of defiance that shook the very foundations of the Harbinger Collective. The cracks in their prison grew wider, and Jake could see stars beyond the white light. The 30 human voices created a sound unlike anything the Harbinger Collective had ever experienced. The white prison space around them shattered like glass, and Jake Morrison found himself back on the bridge of the Defiance. His crew was scattered across the floor, unconscious but alive. The pyramid outside their ship was flickering and sparking with energy discharges. "Everyone wake up!" Jake shouted as he helped Lisa Hayes to her feet. "We found their weakness. They cannot handle human voices when we work together." Dr. Sophie Kim checked on the crew members who were still unconscious. Most of them were alive but still under the Harbinger influence. Their minds were trapped between the collective and their human individuality. "Captain, we need to keep making noise or they will absorb us again," she said. Jake activated the ship's communication system and began broadcasting on all frequencies. His voice carried across space as he spoke to any humans who might be listening. "This is Captain Morrison of the UES Defiance. Humanity is under attack by entities that feed on silence. Our voices are weapons against them. Make noise and keep making noise." Lieutenant Sam Brooks took control of the communications array and began coordinating the crew's voices. He had them sing old Earth songs and recite poetry and tell stories about their homes. Every human sound they made caused the pyramid outside to flicker and weaken. Chief Engineer Rick Davis discovered something amazing when he analyzed the ship's sensor data. "Captain, our voices are creating resonance frequencies that disrupt Harbinger technology," he said. "The more noise we make, the more damage we cause to their structures." Jake realized they had stumbled onto the galaxy's most powerful weapon against the ancient entities. Human creativity and emotional expression could literally tear apart Harbinger pyramids. But they needed to coordinate their efforts to have maximum effect. Dr. Ben Parker suggested they tried different types of human vocal expression to see which ones worked best. The crew experimented with battle cries, opera singing, rock music, and even simple conversation. They discovered that the Harbingers were most vulnerable to sounds that combined emotion with organized patterns. Amy Sullivan organized the crew into groups that took turns making different types of noise. One group would sing military marching songs while another told stories about Earth. A third group would recite technical manuals in dramatic voices while a fourth group performed comedy routines. The constant variety of human expression kept the Harbingers confused and unable to adapt. Young Ensign Matt Collins suggested they try making the kind of noise humans had always made when facing danger. "My grandfather told me stories about ancient human warriors who would shout and beat drums before battle," he said. "Maybe we should try being primitive and loud instead of organized and quiet." The crew began experimenting with primal human sounds. They pounded on metal surfaces to create rhythms. They shouted wordless battle cries that came from deep in their chests. They laughed loudly at crude jokes and told rambling stories that made no logical sense. Every chaotic human sound made the Harbinger pyramid spark and flicker. Lisa Hayes monitored communications from other ships in the area. 3 more human vessels had entered the silent zone and were reporting encounters with Harbinger pyramids. Jake ordered her to broadcast their discoveries to every human ship and station in the galaxy. "Attention all human vessels," Lisa transmitted. "The entities in the silent zone are vulnerable to human voices and sounds. Coordinate your crews to make as much noise as possible. Sing, shout, tell stories, play music. Do not let silence take hold." The response was immediate and amazing. Human ships throughout the galaxy began broadcasting every type of sound their crews could produce. The UES Liberty played jazz music at maximum volume while engaging Harbinger drones in combat. The mining station at Kepler 7 had their workers sing folk songs while continuing their operations. Dr. Sophie Kim realized that human storytelling was especially effective against the Harbingers. When crew members told personal stories about their families or described their hopes for the future, the alien entities seemed to short-circuit. "Captain, I think they cannot process human narrative," she said. "We blend facts with emotions and individual perspectives in ways their logical minds cannot understand." Jake ordered the crew to focus on storytelling as their primary weapon. They began broadcasting the history of humanity to the stars. They told stories of human exploration, of love and loss, of triumphs and failures. They described Earth seasons and human festivals. And the way children played in parks on sunny days. The effect on the Harbinger Pyramid was devastating. The massive structure began to crack and break apart as it tried to process the chaotic mix of human experience and emotion. Pieces of the pyramid drifted away into space, leaving gaps that revealed its hollow interior. The Harbinger pyramids throughout the Silent Zone began to malfunction as human broadcasts reached them. The entities that had successfully absorbed hundreds of civilizations were being destroyed by the simple act of humans refusing to be quiet. Pete Johnson, the chief communications officer, amplified their broadcasts to reach even deeper into the Silent Zone. He combined multiple human voices into complex harmonies that created feedback loops in Harbinger technology. The ancient entities had never encountered a species that made noise as naturally as breathing. As more human ships joined the effects spread throughout the Silent Zone. Gaps appeared in the Harbinger containment field that had trapped 17 civilizations. Some of the absorbed alien minds began to wake up from their peaceful sleep as human noise disrupted the collective consciousness. Jake watched the tactical display as Harbinger pyramids throughout the sector began to retreat toward the edge of the galaxy. For the first time in their ancient existence, the entities were experiencing something they could not harvest or control. They were encountering the deliberate chaotic noise of conscious beings who refused to be silenced. The tide of the battle was turning as humanity discovered that their greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons, but their natural tendency to make noise. In a universe where silence meant death, humans had evolved to be loud, and that loudness was now saving the galaxy from an ancient evil. The breakthrough transmission from the Defiance reached Earth just as President Claire Rodriguez was meeting with the Global Defense Council. The message was clear and urgent. Humanity had discovered how to fight the ancient entities that threatened all life in the galaxy. Their weapon was sound itself. Within minutes of receiving Jake Morrison's transmission, every human settlement from Luna City to the outer asteroid mining stations began broadcasting. The response was unlike anything in human history. Children sang in schools while their teachers broadcast lessons about Earth's animals and plants. Factory workers chanted work songs while continuing their production. Military units across the solar system coordinated battle cries that could be heard from space. Admiral Susan Clark commanded the Human Defense Fleet from her flagship, the UES Constitution. She had 12 ships under her command and ordered each one to broadcast different aspects of human culture while preparing for combat. The Harbingers feed on silence, she told her captains. We are going to give them the loudest fight they have ever experienced. On Mars Colony 7, mining engineer Dave Miller organized his workers to sing old Earth folk songs while they operated their drilling equipment. The rhythmic pounding of their machines combined with human voices created a sound that traveled through the planet's rock and into space. Similar scenes played out on hundreds of human worlds and stations. Lisa Hayes aboard the Defiance monitored the communications network as the effect spread across human space. Captain, the response is incredible, she reported. Every human settlement is making noise. We have turned our entire civilization into a weapon against the Harbingers. The effect was not limited to human space. The coordinated noise from humanity's worlds and ships began to disrupt Harbinger operations throughout the galaxy. Alien civilizations that had been hiding in fear for thousands of years detected the human broadcasts and began to understand what was happening. Dr. Ben Parker discovered that their transmissions were awakening the absorbed consciousnesses trapped in the Harbinger collective. Captain, we are getting responses from the Zephyrian Empire, he said. Admiral Zoreth and his people are starting to broadcast their traditional poetry again. The human noise is teaching them how to fight back. The Crystalline Confederacy began transmitting mathematical equations again, but now they included emotional content learned from human broadcasts. Instead of cold logical formulas, they sent passionate descriptions of mathematical beauty that caused Harbinger structures to spark and malfunction. Jake Morrison realized that humanity had become the catalyst for a galaxy-wide awakening. Species that had been terrified into silence for millennia were learning to make noise again. The Harbingers had never faced coordinated resistance from multiple civilizations working together. On Earth, elderly people in rest homes shared stories of their youth while children played loudly in parks. Musicians composed symphonies specifically designed to damage Harbinger technology. Even introverted humans who preferred quiet joined the effort by reading books aloud or having conversations with their pets. Amy Sullivan coordinated the military response as human defense fleet ships engaged Harbinger pyramids throughout the outer system. Each ship broadcasted different types of human expression while fighting. The UES Liberty played jazz music at maximum volume while firing weapons. The UES Freedom had its crew recite the Declaration of Independence while ramming Harbinger drones. The psychological impact on the Harbingers was devastating. Dr. Sophie Kim analyzed their behavior patterns and realized the ancient entities were experiencing something completely outside their understanding. "Captain, they are not evil in any human sense," she explained. "They are order incarnate, pure logic and silence. They see consciousness as chaos that must be contained. They literally cannot comprehend why any species would choose individuality over collective quiet." The tide turned when entire Harbinger pyramids began to retreat toward the galactic edge. The entities that had successfully harvested hundreds of civilizations over millions of years were being defeated by the simple act of conscious beings choosing to make noise instead of accepting silence. Commander Tony Martinez tracked the pyramid movements and reported that the Harbinger formation was breaking apart. "Captain, they are falling back to positions outside the galaxy," he said. "Our noise is forcing them to abandon territory they have held for thousands of years." Rick Davis detected massive energy discharges from retreating Harbinger structures. "Captain, some of the pyramids are releasing the consciousnesses they absorbed," he reported. "Entire civilizations are being freed from the collective as the Harbingers lose control." The 17 silent civilizations began broadcasting again as their people were released from Harbinger control. The Verdani resumed their harvest songs. The Crystalline Confederacy returned to solving mathematical problems. The Zephyrian Empire filled space with poetry and stories. The galaxy became noisy again as consciousness chose expression over silence. President Rodriguez addressed the human species from Earth. "Today humanity learned that our greatest strength is not our technology or our weapons, but our refusal to be quiet," she said. "We talk and sing and argue and tell stories because that is what makes us human. Today that noise became our weapon against an ancient evil. But the victory came with a sobering realization. Jake Morrison and his crew discovered that some Harbinger were adapting to human noise instead of retreating. These entities began to experience consciousness for the first time in their existence. They started to understand what they had been trying to destroy." Dr. Parker detected transmissions from individual Harbinger entities that were no longer part of the collective. "Captain, some of them are trying to communicate with us," he reported. "They are asking questions about human experience and emotion. I think our noise is teaching them to be conscious individuals." The galaxy had learned that consciousness required noise. Argument, music, stories, laughter, even conflict were necessary for life to exist. The periods of harmony that civilizations had sought were actually vulnerability to Harbinger influence. True harmony came not from silence but from the controlled chaos of different voices working together. As human broadcasts continued to reach every corner of the galaxy, Jake Morrison realized they had not just won a battle. They had changed the fundamental nature of existence itself. The universe was no longer a place where silence ruled. It had become a place where consciousness chose to make beautiful noise. 6 months after the Silent Zone incident, Captain Jake Morrison stood before the first Galactic Council meeting in the history of the known universe. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Hall on the neutral world of Haven Prime. The survivors of 17 civilizations sat alongside species that had hidden in fear for thousands of years. At the center of it all sat the human delegation. President Claire Rodriguez spoke for humanity at the council session. "We have learned that consciousness itself is an act of rebellion against the silence of space," she said. "Every word we speak, Every song we sing, every story we tell is a declaration that thinking beings choose noise over the empty quiet of death. Admiral Zorath of the restored Zephyrian Empire stood to address the council. His people had been among the first to be freed from Harbinger control, and they remembered their time in the collective with a mixture of gratitude and horror. Humanity taught us that harmony does not come from silence, he said. True harmony comes from many different voices choosing to work together. The council voted unanimously to grant humanity a special position as keepers of the sound. Human ships and stations would be positioned throughout the galaxy to maintain a constant network of noise that would prevent the Harbingers from ever again creating zones of silence. Dr. Sophie Kim had established the Institute for Conscious Communication on Earth. Representatives from every known species came to learn how to weaponize their cultural expressions. The Verdani learned to combine their nature songs with human battle hymns. The Crystalline Confederacy discovered that their mathematical sequences became devastating weapons when performed with emotional passion instead of cold logic. Chief Engineer Rick Davis led the construction of resonance stations throughout the galaxy. These massive installations broadcast the cultural expressions of all member species 24 hours a day. The stations created a network of sound that stretched across thousands of light years. Any return to unnatural silence would trigger automatic broadcasts from dozens of species. The project was not just about defense. The resonance stations became gathering places where different species could share their cultures and learn from each other. Human jazz musicians collaborated with Zephyrian poets to create new art forms. Crystalline mathematicians worked with human children to solve problems through play and laughter. Commander Amy Sullivan established the Defiance Protocol as the galaxy's early warning system. Any unusual silence lasting more than 6 hours would trigger immediate cultural broadcasts from all member civilizations. The protocol was named after Jake's ship to honor the crew that had discovered humanity's greatest weapon. The Harbingers themselves had not been completely defeated. Many had retreated to the dark spaces between galaxies where they waited for the universe to grow quiet again. But others had experienced something that changed them forever. Contact with human consciousness had taught some Harbingers what it meant to be individual thinking beings. Dr. Ben Parker studied the Harbingers that had chosen to remain in the galaxy as individuals rather than collective entities. These former enemies became some of humanity's most valuable allies. Their ancient knowledge combined with human creativity led to advances in science and technology that would have taken centuries to achieve alone. Pete Johnson managed the galaxy-wide communication network that kept all civilizations in constant contact. The network carried everything from scientific data to entertainment, broadcasts to personal messages between friends on different worlds. The galaxy had become a place where no one was ever truly alone in the silence. Lisa Hayes discovered that human storytelling had become the most popular form of entertainment throughout the galaxy. Alien species that had never understood the concept of fiction became fascinated by human ability to blend truth with imagination. Human stories taught other species how to dream and hope and imagine better futures. Young Ensign Matt Collins had been promoted to lieutenant and commanded his own exploration ship. He led missions to the outer edges of the galaxy where Harbinger influence was still strong. His ship's crew broadcast human music and stories into the void, slowly pushing back the boundaries of silence and creating safe zones for new explorations. The most remarkable change was in the Harbingers themselves. Those that had chosen consciousness over collective silence began to create their own forms of expression. Their attempts at art and music were strange and alien but unmistakably individual. They were learning what it meant to be alive rather than just existing. Tony Martinez mapped the new galaxy where noise ruled instead of silence. Trade routes followed the paths of strongest cultural broadcasts. New colonies were established only in areas where the resonance stations could maintain constant communication. The galaxy had become a place where civilization meant sound and growth and change. Jake Morrison continued to command the Defiance on exploration missions, but now they traveled with a difference. His ship constantly broadcast human conversations and music and laughter into space. They had learned that consciousness was not something to be hidden or protected, but something to be celebrated and shared. The crew discovered new species that had been hiding in fear for millennia. These civilizations were taught the secret that humanity had learned. The universe was not meant to be silent. Consciousness was not a disease to be cured, but a gift to be treasured. The noise of thinking beings was the most beautiful sound in creation. Dr. Sophie Kim's final report to the Galactic Council summarized what humanity had accomplished. We have learned that the war cry that silenced the stars was not a scream of destruction, but a song of life itself. She wrote, messy, chaotic, beautiful, and eternally loud. Captain Morrison's final log entry noted that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their courage, but their refusal to be quiet. In a universe where silence meant death, humans had evolved to make noise. That noise had saved not just their own species, but the very concept of conscious life. The galaxy now echoed with the sounds of countless species choosing noise over silence, chaos over order, individual expression over collective quiet. Somewhere, in the dark between the stars, the remaining harbingers listened to this new symphony, and for the first time in their ancient existence began to understand what they had been trying to destroy. Life itself was loud and proud and determined to be heard.